Hey everyone, Miss K here. In this video today, I'm going to teach you how to use graphite pencils. So if you've never used like an artist set of graphite pencils, this video is for you. I'm going to show you how to get all the range of tonal values and then how to use those tonal values to shade basic shapes into forms. So if that interests you and you would like to hear more, make sure to keep on watching. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you are looking at my ladybug, which is my overhead projector. And I have just a piece of paper in front of me. It was just a piece of scratch drawing paper that I had. Doesn't matter what size your paper is. Mine just happens to be extremely rectangular. That's okay. A quick note about drawing paper. It's the same for colored pencils as well. Make sure you're using the side that has a little bit of texture on the front of it. If you flip your paper over, you're not going to be able to catch this on camera, but one side tends to be smoother. You can even like run your fingers over it. And the other side is a little bit more bumpy. You want to use the bumpy side. And so it just has this texture to it. Think of it really like pores like on your face that would like hold and gather different materials. Same with your paper. You want your paper to actually be porous so it can kind of hold those materials. So it doesn't totally just smear and go all over the place. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce us to colored pencil, or not to graphite, sorry, excuse me. And while I'm doing that, I found it's easiest to explain this with a number line since many of my students are familiar with the number line. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I also recommend that you do this just so it helps you to have those notes. Okay, so just draw on a regular old number line. And I want you in the center to do, this would be like your 0. Okay, and I want you under 0 to write HB. So if you have a set of drawing pencils at home, you'll notice that there's all these weird letters and numbers, H's and B's and 2's and 4's. What do they all mean? I'm going to explain what they mean, but the easiest way, again, is to use a number line, okay? So I want you to think of HB as your 0, as your ground point. Now, HB pencils are going to be just normal pencils that you would use in your everyday life. So like your mechanical pencils, wooden pencils, all that. Almost always, they're going to be an HB pencil. Okay, on the B side of HB, I want you to go ahead and do 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so you're going up in numbers by 2s, and you're gonna go 2B, 4B, 6B, and 8Bs. You just add a B to each of those. You also, I don't have a ton of room on mine, I forgot one. There's just a regular 1 right in here, that's a 1, and that's just a regular old B. You don't need to do a 1B or anything, but there's 1 and then B right there. Okay, on the opposite side, you're going to do a similar thing, although not exact. So I'm going to go ahead and do my 1 here. Now that I remembered, I need to put it there. And then I'm going 1, 2, and then 4. And then I'm going to stop, and I'll explain why you stop there as well. So just in a very similar breath. So you go H, and then 2H, and then 4H for your number line in this direction, okay? So you should have a number line going from -4. I forgot to put my negative signs, if anyone caught that. So -4 would be 4H, -2 would be 2H, -1 would be H, 0 would be HB, 1 would be B, 2 would be 2B, 4 would be 4B, 6 would be 6B, and 8 would be 8B. So those are all of your pencils. So if you look at your pencils, you should have B's and H's and 2H's and HB's and all that fun stuff. So go ahead and take your pencils and put them in that order. Now I will say sometimes you won't have all of these and that's totally fine. So I actually don't have all of them, but I do have a 2H and I have my HB, I have a B, 2B, 4B, and 6B. So I don't have an 8B. I don't have an H and I don't have a 4H, and I'm not worried about that. I just have them in order. So make sure to have them in order in front of you from negative numbers to positive numbers. And continuing using my HB pencil, I just want to explain this again in a way that is simple and makes sense. So what these numbers are telling you is how hard or how soft lead is inside your pencil, okay? So I want you to think of H's as the H standing for hard, okay? So H equals hard. So the farther over from 0 that we get, the harder the lead inside the pencil will be, okay? Which means that less of our pencil is going to rub off on our paper, which means that our lines are going to be lighter. So L-I-G-H-T-E-R. So the farther over you get here, the harder the lead is and the lighter it's going to be. I have a similar thing on the other side. So of course, if this side's getting harder on this side, that means on this side, it's going to be getting darker, which means that our lead is going to be softer. So over here, our lead is getting softer, more of it's coming off on our paper. My little thing to help us remember that is using B to remember that it's going to be bold. So you're going to have bold lines, so it's going to be darker. Again, this I feel like is the best way and the easiest way to explain how graphite pencils work. Again, because a lot of students are familiar with number lines and negative numbers, positive numbers, and we have those little acronyms to help us out, okay? So you do need to understand that and know that way before we get started. But as always, we like to start with our light pencils and then move our way to our darkest color. So that works with anything, whether you're using graphite or colored pencil or oil pastels or anything like that. You always start with your lightest value, then you move up to your darkest value. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a value scale using all my different pencils. So you can do any kind of shape you want. So I like to do squiggles. I don't know why, I just do. So my shape is going to be in here. Okay, and I'm going to do a value scale in here. So let me zoom in nice and close, make sure it's focused. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to start with my 2H since that's the first one that I have. I don't have a 4H or a regular H, and I am not worried about that at all. Okay. So I'm going to start by carefully coloring in, shading in my project. So I'm actually going to color quite a large section with my 2H pencil. So I'm going in one direction to start. I'm pressing lightly, not pressing too hard. Okay, so that's probably about as far as I want to go. So I've colored in one direction. This is called hatching. I'm going to go ahead and rotate my paper, still pressing really lightly. And I'm going to go ahead and do a second layer really, really lightly. And I'm not going to go all the way up here. I'm going to go most of the way, but not quite all the way. Okay. I'm just going to repeat that process a couple more times where each time I'm bringing my layer down a little bit more. And what that should start to do is you should start to get a nice color change with your, or tonal change, since these aren't actually colors. It's all just going to be grays. Okay, so you should get a really nice smooth transition between your lightest of light grays and your darker grays. At this point, just because it is a little tough with graphite, if you have an eraser, you can lighten up this one area. It looks like I actually pressed a little bit too hard for mine. So I have something here called a kneaded eraser that I'm gonna loosen up for us, but a lot of my students love kneaded erasers. Kneaded erasers are really great when using graphite. And if you've never used one, they look like almost like clay. Oops, so I'm pulling it, stretching it. So this is a kneaded eraser, and you actually, let me zoom out for a moment. You actually like pull it like this to clean it. So a lot of students, again, they really love using kneaded erasers. And so kneaded erasers are good because you use them just by pressing, and then it lifts up some color. So if you wanted to lift up some of your graphite, you could do that, okay? So I've lifted up a little bit of my graphite. I'm gonna make sure just to have it fade really nicely. And I like the way that looks. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to my HB. And I'm gonna do a very similar process. So I'm gonna have my HB go from like here all the way to here. Okay, So I'm just going to layer, careful layer one direction of my HB pencil. Light layers, of course. Okay, then I'm going to slowly move over and do a second layer in a different direction. Okay, same thing in a third direction. Again, just moving my pencil down slightly each time. Making sure to fill up all of my paper. Try not to have gaps and everything in between your paper. And then I'm going to go ahead. I like to, at this point, use like a circular motion just to make sure I'm covering all of my paper and get a nice layer of graphite there. So again, it should be fading from a light color to a darker color, slowly getting darker and darker. This is where a lot of my students like to use their finger to blend. I really don't recommend doing that just because your fingers have oil in them and your oil is going to go on your pigment. And if you need to erase it later, it's going to be really hard to do that. So I always just take my 2H pencil and I just go ahead and blend those guys back into each other. So if at any point you notice you have like a line of color or a tonal change, all you got to do is just take your 2H pencil usually and kind of just blend it out. Okay. So that's my HB pencil. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple more layers down over here where it's really dark or where I want it to be really dark. And then I'm going to blend out that line that I just created. And make sure I really have my edges completely covered. Okay. Okay, once you get to this point, you can go ahead and move on to your next one. So very similar process, going to take my B pencil, which you can tell is already so much darker. And I'm going to go ahead and do a light layer, blending into my HB and out of my HB pencil. Okay, I'm going to rotate my paper, do a second layer. Okay, rotate my paper, do a third layer. And again, each time I'm adding a layer, I'm moving over slightly. And once I have enough of my value down, if I see any kind of line, I just blend it out. Okay, so far you should have it going from a nice light color all the way to a darker color. On my projection, I'm seeing that it's these lines that are here are really emphasized. I'm just going to take my B pencil and try to blend that out. Again, I go in like these circular motions to kind of help with that. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my HB pencil up at this line. Just so it can be, again, a nice smooth transition, okay? So that's looking better. I'm going to go ahead also and take my 2H pencil, just kind of cover some of these lines that I'm noticing. Again, your 2H pencil just kind of blends everything together and makes it look really nice. So I really like to use it kind of as like a final touch. Okay. So again, we're just going to repeat that same exact process. Just trying to cover up some of these lines. We're going to continue with my next darkest one, which is going to be a 2B. And we're just repeating that process over. So blending it up into my B and down. And the more, of course, the farther down you go, the more layers you have. Okay, rotating my image or my paper. I'm not pressing hard, I'm just doing multiple layers. Okay, so again, you just kind of want to look, I apologize, I know it's kind of shiny. You want to kind of see, make sure that it's blending well together. And as long as it's blending well, you're free to continue moving on. So I'm going to move on to my 4B pencil. So again, similar process where I'm starting over here. You'll also start to notice both on the projector screen as well as on your paper that it starts to get shiny because graphite is reflective. So there's nothing really you can do about that. It's kind of one of the just qualities of graphite. A lot of artists kind of use that to their advantage when creating graphite pieces, but that's just kind of one of the artsy things about graphite. Again, so just making sure that you cover your whole paper and that it's a nice smooth transition all the way around. So as you can tell, I really move my paper really in every direction possible, just to really get that layered. Get a nice dark tonal range right here. Okay, and I also have a 6B. If you don't have a 6B or an 8B, obviously you wouldn't be able to do this last step, but 6B is just going to be the even darkest tone. So you're just going to go ahead and take that and do the same process. So you're really layering your colors into each other. I'm going to start by tracing that edge. And you'll just notice how dramatically different this dark color is from over here. Okay, so all I did again is just very carefully color that in. Again, you don't normally have to do this for your darker pencils. So your your HBs, you would have to do this, but like your 6Bs and your 4Bs, probably not. But I am just probably going to take a little bit of my 2H pencil and just blend out a couple areas. So if you notice like any white of your paper is still showing through, just make sure to adjust that. Okay, and with that, I have a pretty solid spectrum. I go from really light lights to really dark darks, all using graphite. If at this point, sometimes my students like to trace the outer edge of their project, you can absolutely do that. So I would just trace this with my darkest one. I mean, you could use a HB as well, but I think it always looks nice to do it with your darkest value. This just kind of gets rid of the lines that you see from coloring outside the lines slightly and can help make your project look really clean. Okay, and so that is an outline. I probably should have taken my HB pencil on this lighter area to outline it just because that's such a strong contrast. But like I said, you can really see that difference of how dark your darks are versus how light your lights are. So this would be an opportunity if I wanted to take my kneaded eraser and just kind of press down, get rid of some of that graphite, just it lifts some of that up so it's not so intense. And kind of rub it off too with your graphite. Okay, so still more intense, but not as bad as it was before. Okay, so that, my friends, is how you would create a tonal range and value using graphite. Again, it's going to be shiny because it's graphite. I might go through, you can kind of notice if I hold it this direction, there are still some lines here. So all I would have to do is just continue layering my graphite until those lines go away, coloring and drawing in a circular motion. But that's it, guys, for this video. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to shade, so turning a circle into a sphere using graphite. So I will see you in the next video. Good luck and have fun.